Welcome to The Explainer. Our whole goal here is to take big ideas and break them down into clear, actionable insights.
So, let me ask you something. Think about your day so far. Did you know that more than 40% of the actions you took weren't actually conscious decisions? They were habits. We're about to explore that hidden architecture of our lives, and it all starts with a wild medical mystery that changed everything we thought we knew about behavior.
So, this is the story of a man named Eugene Pauly, whose life was completely turned upside down by a viral infection that attacked his brain. Yeah, a virus had basically gone in and surgically destroyed the part of his brain responsible for memory, the medial temporal lobe. It got to the point where some mornings he'd get up, cook bacon and eggs, and then, maybe 40 minutes later, do the exact same thing all over again with absolutely no memory of eating the first meal.
And this is where things get really fascinating, because it reveals this incredible paradox. While Eugene's conscious mind was essentially a blank slate, his life was still being run by these powerful automatic routines.
I mean, think about this. He couldn't even draw a map of the block he lived on. But every single morning, he'd go out for a walk and find his way home. His wife Beverly would be terrified he'd get lost, but he always came back. He couldn't even point to his own kitchen. But when researchers asked him what he'd do if he got hungry, he would just walk straight to a cabinet and grab a jar of nuts.
So how is that possible, right? How could a man with literally no short-term memory learn new habits? That was the question that completely puzzled scientists. How is his brain building these new pathways, these new behaviors, completely separate from any conscious thought? The answer led them to a massive breakthrough about a part of the brain that all of us have.
To figure this out, scientists over at MIT started running these really clever experiments, and what they uncovered was a simple neurological code that runs all of our habits. I'm talking everything from brushing our teeth to backing the car out of the driveway without even thinking about it. It's this elegant, three-step process. It starts with a cue. That's the trigger that puts your brain on autopilot. That cue then leads to the routine, which can be any action, any thought, or even an emotion. And then it all ends with a reward. That's the little prize that tells your brain, hey, this loop is worth remembering for the future. You see, this loop is basically an evolutionary marvel. It's so efficient that once a habit is really formed, the decision-making parts of your brain, they kind of just go quiet. They can power down, which saves a ton of mental energy for other more important things. This was shown perfectly in an experiment with rats in a maze. The first time a rat went through, its brain was working furiously, firing on all cylinders the entire time. But once it learned the route, its brain activity just plummeted. It only spiked at the very beginning when it heard the click of the gate, the cue, and at the very end when it got its little piece of chocolate, the reward. The actual routine of running the maze, totally automatic.
And this was the key to Eugene's mystery. That virus, it hadn't touched his basal ganglia. So this ancient part of his brain could still create new habit loops, even when his memory couldn't. That morning walk wasn't a choice. It was a habit loop. The sight of the front door was the cue, the walk was the routine, and the feeling of fresh air, of finding his way home, that was the reward.
Okay, so the habit loop explains how our habits work. But how can you actually use that knowledge to change a bad one? Well, that's where the golden rule of change comes in. Now, this is the master key right here. You see, those neurological pathways for our habits are carved deep in our brains. Trying to just stop a bad habit with willpower is incredibly difficult because your brain is still craving that reward at the end. So you don't fight the habit, you redesign it. The formula is actually surprisingly simple. To change your habit, you don't mess with the cue or the reward. You keep the exact same trigger and you satisfy the exact same craving. The only thing you do is swap out the routine that's sandwiched in the middle.
And this isn't just theory, by the way. There's a powerful technique called habit reversal therapy that's built on this very idea. Let's look at a real case. A patient named Mandy who is in therapy for chronic nail biting.
So first, her therapist helped her identify the cue, a feeling of tension in her fingertips. And the reward? It wasn't really about the nails. It was a quick, satisfying sense of physical stimulation. So they kept the cue, the tension, and they kept the need for the reward, the stimulation, but they inserted a new routine. Whenever she felt that tension, she would immediately rub her arm or clench her fist to get a similar physical sensation. And guess what? It worked. Within a month, her nail-biting habit was gone.
Now, some habits are just more powerful than others. Researchers call these keystone habits. They're like the small wins that create a massive domino effect, starting a chain reaction that totally transforms other completely unrelated parts of your life.
Back in 1987, when Paul O'Neill took over the struggling aluminum company Alcoa, Wall Street investors were all gathered for his first big speech. They were expecting to hear about profits and synergy. Instead, he got up there and said, "I want to talk to you about worker safety." People thought he was crazy. One investor literally ran out of the room and told his clients to sell their stock immediately.
But O'Neill knew exactly what he was doing. He understood that to make Alcoa the safest company in America, he had to attack its fundamental habits. He created a new loop. Anytime there was an injury, that was the cue, the unit president had to report to him within 24 hours with a plan to prevent it from ever happening again. That was the new routine. And the reward? The people who embraced the system got promoted.
And the results were just staggering. Focusing on that one keystone habit, safety, forced improvements across the entire company in communication, efficiency, and quality. By the time O'Neill retired, Alcoa's profits had skyrocketed by 500%.
And you can absolutely apply this to your own life. You don't have to try and overhaul everything at once. Studies show that people who adopt a keystone habit, like exercising every day, they also just start eating better. They become more productive at work. They even spend less on their credit cards. And not because they plan to, but because the discipline from that one habit just spills over into everything else.
So, this all brings us to the most powerful takeaway from all of this research. It's not just about understanding the science. It's about recognizing the power that this knowledge gives you. We have the blueprint now. We have the Q routine reward loop, we have the golden rule for changing the routine, and we have the strategy of focusing on keystone habits. The final, and really the most essential ingredient, is just recognizing that you have the ability and the responsibility to make a choice.
The philosopher William James wrote that during a period of deep depression in his own life, it's such a profound reminder that the belief that you can change is the first and most critical step in actually making it happen. Once you know you're not just a slave to your automatic behaviors, you're free. So the question is, which habit will you choose to change first?